So I wonder if that means we're going to lose our G rating, our family rating. Hello, friends and lovers. Thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir.
Hi!
Today is Sunday, February 27th. Let's turn off the offensive punk rock music that we will explain in just a moment. February 27th, 2022. And we are glad you joined us. This is an important discussion we're going to have today because it's fun, and fun is important. This fine day, February 27th, the 58th day of this, your best year yet. 307 days left to make it so.
307 days?
307 days of adventure and romance.
Ooh.
Of revelry and revelations.
All mine.
Yes, yes. Productive days and passionate nights. Fun and games, anything could happen and probably will. There are 301 days until Christmas, 15 days until White Day. Remember Valentine's Day Part 2, the day when you boys need to... I think guys already are on the hook for this, but it is Valentine's Day 2, White Day, in 15 days when it's basically Valentine's Part 2. And here's the thing, something I didn't know, although we've talked about White Day for the last 2 months, there's also Black Day.
Is there? That's cool.
Yeah, well, White Day is primarily a Japanese holiday. They're Valentine's Part 2. Where Valentine's is Sadie Hawkins, the gals are in charge. White Day is the day the guys reciprocate. Well, it turns out that in South Korea, they celebrate Black Day, not on the 15th, but on the 14th of the month. So April 14th, 46 days from today. And it's also for the... I shouldn't use the expression, but we did just go to the movies. It's for the lonely hearts, for the folks who didn't necessarily have somebody to celebrate Valentine's Day. You celebrate however you wish. You be good to your own selves. Of course, we said do that on Valentine's Day,
it's kind of like Rand's Day, as a matter of fact.
Rand's Day, yeah, like February 2nd, the day when you just be good to your own bad self.
Wait, when is Black Day again?
Black Day is 46 days from today, April 14th.
Oh.
Now, that's kind of strange because, no, I guess that's not strange. That's exactly right. I'm getting confused by the 28 days, 30 days thing. But yes, April 14th, 1 month after after White Day, which is 1 month after So long story short, when we talked about Valentine's Day, I've always said it shouldn't be a day, it should be a season. Well, somebody got that idea because second Valentine's Day is March 14th, which is called White Day in Japan and other places where they celebrate it. And now third Valentine's Day, Black Day, celebrated in South Korea. You do what you want. We're just going to use it as extra reasons to celebrate. Also, on this day in 1827, so 195 years ago, the first Mardi Gras celebrated in New Orleans.
Yay!
Yes, good stuff. We've talked about, we've got to get back to New Orleans. We went last spring. Great time. And Mardi Gras this year in New Orleans. If you're anywhere near Louisiana, Mardi Gras is on March 1st this year. But yeah, first one back 1827. Mardi Gras had been celebrated as a holiday before that, but Mardi Gras is Louisiana. Mardi Gras is New Orleans, and that is the way it should and is done. So 1827, a group of masked and costumed students danced through the streets of New Orleans, Louisiana, marking the beginning of the city's famous Mardi Gras celebrations. The celebration of Carnival, or the weeks between Twelfth Night, January 6th, and Ash Wednesday, the beginning of the Christian period of Lent. We need to talk about what we're giving up for Lent. Spread from Rome across Europe, later to the Americas. Now, nowhere in the United States is Carnival celebrated as grandly as New Orleans. Famous for its over-the-top parades and parties for Mardi Gras, or Fat Tuesday, the last day of the Carnival season. Good stuff. Again, if you're anywhere near there, we will be jealous if you make it, but we want you to go. 195 years ago today.
I can't wait for Mardi Gras.
Yes, New Orleans, we will be back. We love you. We miss you. Yes. Also, happy birthday shout-outs to singer Josh Groban, one of the great singers, and guitar player Neal Schon of Journey, one of the great guitar players. Oh, where are my notes here? I have their ages, and I wrote that down, and I know what I did. Sorry about that, folks. A little preparation snafu there. Josh Groban turns 41 years old today. Neal Schon, 67 years old. And still, I mean, it's we kind of had that with, who was it really? The Beatles were the first people to really show us that you could still rock out no matter how old you are. Lord knows how old Keith Richards is these days. And now we're seeing just mainstream AOR, what used to be called album-oriented rock stars. People like Neal Schon have still got it, still amazing. In fact, we're going to see the band Styx this summer
yes.
with the ultimate Styx fan, Mark. You know who you are. That's
Yes.
going to be great. And I swear, I want to be Tommy Shaw when I grow up. This is a guy who, no matter how old he gets, he never gets older. He's just rocking out as hard as he ever did. So happy birthday, Neal Schon. Happy birthday to Josh Groban. It's also National Kahlúa Day. So if you're one of those folks, for example, who drinks too much coffee, well, you just later in the day, you switch over to coffee liqueur. If you enjoy your Kahlúa in cream, however you like to do it, it's also National Strawberry Day. And to celebrate that, I had my favorite way of consuming strawberries, which were strawberry pancakes this morning. And I found that if you bake strawberries into pancakes, they can get a little messy and like too wet, too moist. So I found the trick is do this, mix it 50-50 with blueberries. So it was strawberry and blueberry pancakes, which is why I haven't quite met my weight loss goals. But it's National Strawberry Day. How could I resist? And finally, shout out to my dearly beloved daughter because today is National Pokémon Day.
Pika pika.
Pika Pika. Actually, that's funny. You know, Pokemon, maybe you don't know. Some of you might not know. We've got a lot of gamers who are fans, but we've got a lot of people who aren't. So Pokemon started, I've got it in the notes here, 15 years ago. It was one of those things where I thought it was going to be like Pogs. I thought, 5 years later, nobody will even remember what Pokemon is. But no, it's had staying power.
Yes.
I mentioned on one of our podcasts, I actually went with the aforementioned daughter to see the film Detective Pikachu.
Yeah, good movie.
Pokemon
actually.
Detective. Just the most ridiculous, stupid premise you can imagine. And I was totally wrong. It was a great movie. It was enormous fun and heartfelt and just great. So if you're a Pokemon fan, I have to say, they did do a survey. Who's your favorite Pokemon? And I don't understand, but in the top 5, Pikachu's not even on the list. Charizard, Gengar, Arcanine, Bulbasaur, that's cool. And then Blaziken. Yes.
Bulba.
I don't get it, but
Bulbasaur.
I'm not a Pokemon guy. I know it peripherally.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, some of these may not have been in the original game. They did the black and the silver and the gold and all these other editions, and now they've got Pokemon Go, which everybody plays. Adults I know, and I don't mean adults who are 18, I mean adults who are 60, are playing this on their cell phones. So Pokemon, love it or leave it, it's not going away. So more power to those of you who enjoy that, and happy National Pokemon Day. Now, what are we listening to this week? Man, we got some entries for what we're listening to. First of all, what you were listening to at the beginning of the show, yes, we changed up the theme music.
For fun.
Yes, we'll talk about that. But also, we're talking today, this was a requested topic, a suggested topic, I should say. And we're talking about positivity, we're talking about optimism. We're going to tie a few things together, but some folks might think, why are you doing your usual cheerful shtick? Why are you happy? What? There's war. There's
war.
bad juju out there. And that's true. So one thing I want to mention is two of the things that we're listening to this week, a couple of shows by Yaron Brook, in which, and believe me, we take it seriously too. He takes the situation in Ukraine very seriously, gives a great analysis for it, gives you the few reasons there are for optimism, but also has a very serious analysis of what could happen. Very well grounded, highly recommended. The links to those 2 episodes of the Yaron Brook Show, if you're not already listening, are in the show notes that it will be posted right after the show. Also is a link to an article by Robert Tracinski. Robert Tracinski is an unusually good writer.
He is.
He writes really, really well. I don't know anybody really who writes about current events better than he does. And I've had, great things to say and more critical things to say about Mr. Tracinski throughout the years. He's been on an interesting journey, but his writing has always been top notch.
Yes.
So there's a link in the show notes to his latest article, Bullets, Not a Taxi, which you will recognize from the Ukrainian premier, saying, we don't want a taxi. We don't want, the United States, and during a phone call asked him, do you want us to get you out of Ukraine? He said, I don't need a ride out of the Ukraine. Some people translated that as a taxi. I don't need a ride out of the Ukraine. I need bullets. I need ammunition.
Yep.
This young guy who started out as a comedian
Yeah.
and then imitating, spoofing the prime minister, ends up getting elected president of the Ukraine, and it turns out to be this great leader
Yes.
during this particularly challenging time. So definitely read that article. It's a long one, but it's one of those ones where you get into it and you're like, I thought this was going to be really long, but it's great.
Yes.
Robert Tracinski's article, Bullets Not a Taxi. One more thing that we're listening to this week because we're total narcissists. No. What I recommend you listen to this week. We had the most fun on Friday. Oh my gosh.
Woohoo!
We do a Thursday show that's part of the Ayn Rand Center UK. The show is called
Life on Earth.
Life on Earth. Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir. We do that every Thursday, 5 o'clock. You're probably already watching it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But every now and then we get invited to co-host or to serve as a moderator on another show on the channel. And that's always fun. We've done the Daily Objective. We've done the Weekly Objective. We've done some shows with the great James Stevens Valliant.
Woohoo!
And so on, was it Thursday or Friday, Jimmy contacts us through Facebook Messenger and says, hey, I'm looking for, co-host, somebody to do the show with me tomorrow, Friday. Can you do it? I said, yeah, sure. What's the show on? He said, well, you pick the topic. They're Leonard Peikoff lectures. So these are philosophical and cultural lectures Leonard Peikoff wrote. And James Valliant does this great job analyzing one of them every week. I'm like, oh, yeah, we got to do that. Sure, we're in for it. Anytime you want. So we picked out an episode. We did The Spirit of the 60s, which was an analysis of the underlying philosophy that led up to and caused what happened in the 60s and what grew out of that afterwards. Very interesting discussion. Always good to talk to James Valliant about that. But here's the thing. After the show, we wrap it up so nobody can hear what we're talking about. We're just chatting. We're just chatting afterward. He said, well, the guy who I usually do this with, Ed, is not going to be available for a while. And I was wondering, if you're interested, we could do this again next week. We could do this regularly for a while. Mm-hmm. And the long and short of it is we're going to be doing that. So not only is the link to that episode great fun, and in the show notes you'll get a chance to watch that, but you can see us live next Friday.
Yeah, so you have 3 days out of the week that you can join us. First here on Sundays, 5 minutes. Thursdays, Life on Earth, and now Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Jimmy Valliant going over the essays.
Is that crazy or what? We're going to be so busy.
Great.
We're doing 3 shows a week. Now, I know people who do 5 shows a week. They work Monday through Friday, or Yaron Brook often does 4 or 5 shows during a busy week if he's not traveling too much. So I know, boo-hoo, get out your tiniest violin and play it for us. But I think 3 shows a week is pretty darn good for us.
I think it is.
Given today's theme music, I can almost say pretty damn good. Okay, I have to explain that.
Old people dressed in black.
I feel like we're going to get to the punchline here because the impetus for today's show, I originally had in mind a different idea for today's episode. I was putting together notes on past shows where I could present a 60-second version of an entire show, and then afterwards what we do is we cut them up. And the reason for that is there's a thing that YouTube has been doing lately. They've been promoting short videos more. And Yaron, for example, has found that if his producers, his guys behind the scene, take a 60-second clip of something he did, just 60 seconds of an interesting part of one of his shows, and put it out there, it may get 1,000 or 2,000 or, in one case, something like 150,000 views just by virtue of being promoted more on YouTube. When you go to YouTube, you see a bunch of stuff you didn't ask for. They've got an algorithm to figure out, what are we showing you that these people didn't even ask for anything yet? That's how that works. So Amy and I have been thinking, and we've mentioned this before, we need to make some of those 50-second, 60-second clips, see if we can get a little bit of that viral action going on there. Not that anybody wants a virus these days, but you know what I mean. And I thought, well, we'll do that. We'll do that today. We'll do 60 seconds on a given topic, and then boom, right to the next one. See how it goes in the chat, what you all have to say, and then boom, another 60 seconds. And I got a message earlier today through one of these social networking messaging systems. And it's a great friend of the show who's probably in the chat, although I haven't looked at the chat yet.
No, he's here. Jim's here.
Jim Ashley.
Hey, Jim.
And sometimes I'll say your names and I don't give last names and give people privacy, but Jim's like me in that when he posts stuff to the social networks, he posts them with his full name. And not just with his full name. He does the thing I do, which is he makes them all public. It's like, nobody's going to steal my identity because I put up a philosophical essay. And he puts up philosophical essays. Some of them are short. Some of them are really essay length. Always worth reading. Very good insights. And Jim messaged me today and said, have you and Amy decided on a topic for today's show yet? And if not, can I suggest one? I'm like, great. He said, what does it mean to have a positive attitude?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, we talk about that a lot. Heck, we did a whole episode on positivity. But yeah, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And he went on, does it mean looking at life through rose-colored glasses? Mm-hmm. Does it mean denial of the negatives that do exist in life and the world? Or does it mean something else entirely, such as accepting reality in toto, not denying any of the negatives, but on the other hand, not forgetting the positives? And then he wraps up with, this is great, he says, does Johnny Mercer's advice to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, say everything, or is his statement incomplete? And I want to answer those questions and have a little bit of fun with it, too.
Yes. And I've got some answers as well for you.
And I want to hear what Amy's got to say about it. I should say, though, because I have to explain what happened at the beginning of the show here. He sent one more message before the beginning of the show. He said, by the way, do you have some of your complete musical performances posted anywhere on Facebook? I and others would like to enjoy them, especially because you're going to have to make up for your lousy strip act. Those of you who saw episode 69 know what he's talking about.
Wow.
Now this is great because he wrote, tell Amy, I said, so she'll be motivated to keep you on task, that being to direct us to your posted performances or posting them for the first time. And he mentions Amy's a musician too, which is true. You'll find that out as we talk about this. And we want to hear more of her as well. Well, I certainly want to hear more of her as well. So thank you for asking about that. And that is why, that is the answer to the mystery. What the hell were you playing at the beginning of the show? And what I played at the beginning of the show was not what I intended to play. I was looking at, I could play something other than that bass guitar riff we usually play at the beginning, our theme song.
Yes.
And I happened to bring up a song called Old... See, I'm keeping the show G-rated, so I can't actually say the title of the song. Old F's dressed in black.
Yeah, old...
old guys.
Old expletives
old
dressed
effers, old men. And the reason for this song, and, as you heard, it's kind of punk rock kind of...
Yeah, it's basically about, growing old as a, somebody who is into punk rock earlier in life or, perhaps new wave or however. And,
or just
you're
rock
really
and roll
old
musicians.
Now and you've grown a little fluffy in the middle, so you always have to wear black to make yourself appear more slender on stage.
That is a thing. So, I could just as well have called it Old Guys Dressed in Black. But it needed a little more edge than that because...
Linda says old ducks.
Old ducks dressed in black. That's good. Thank you, Linda, for that. Because, autocorrect would have done that anyway. Old ducks dressed in black.
Yes.
So that's that song. And that's a demo. We're actually working. I shouldn't say working because it's been 4 years since we've worked on it. But we're working on a proper studio version of that song. That was the demo I put together when I wrote the song, so that's me playing all of the instruments. We actually have a proper drummer who's recorded the drum track.
Yeah.
I could do, between me and Amy, we could do everything else the song needs.
We could.
But I can't play drums as fast as that song requires. So I wrote a song I can't play.
Well, I could probably do a good amount of...
You might be able to do it fast enough.
drumming.
Yeah.
I could even use the double bass pedal.
Yeah, it's not complicated. It just needs to be about 200 beats a minute, which is hard.
Yeah.
As I learned the other day when I tried to do a song for Lee Wardlaw's thread, I'm a vegetable, you're a vegetable, it was the potato song. Anyway, that's why we use that as the opening song. I will be eventually using some other music as part of the opening, but to the question, can you post some of it?
Yeah, we
I don't know if
could.
you really want us to do that.
We could.
I've posted a lot of stuff of me at the piano or with a guitar singing a song. I've done 4 different George Harrison songs that I've posted on Facebook. They're not too hard to find. Everybody loves Neil Young these days. I've posted a version of Cinnamon Girl. It's just me on guitar, and then sitting next to me on guitar is me on bass, which is kind of funny. But when we were in a band, when Amy and I were both in a band, we had a band, a friend of ours from college gets back in touch with us. There's a whole story I won't tell now, although it's kind of fun. We'll do a whole episode on it. That's what we'll do. And long story short, he puts together a band to back a solo album he wants to do, and it turns into a full-fledged band.
Yeah.
It was no longer a solo thing. The reason I say that is because he wrote all the songs. We didn't write any of the songs.
Right. Well, we wrote the
Now,
parts.
we wrote our parts for all of the songs.
Yes.
He came in with an acoustic guitar and said, here's the song. So, I'm the lead guitarist, Amy's the bass player. He didn't give us any of that.
Right.
So if you look up Ron Toole, as if the name was actually Ronald Toole, and the Capitalists. Ron Toole and the Capitalists.
Yes. We are the Capitalists.
You can find us on YouTube. Amy will probably post a couple links in the chat.
Maybe.
Or just look it up on YouTube after the show.
Look it up on YouTube.
Ron Toole and the Capitalists. We released a CD.
Yes.
True Tales of Dereliction. So it was kind of a combination of folk music and punk music.
Yes.
Because it was the kind of stuff that a former punk rock lead singer wrote with an acoustic guitar in his hands. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a hybrid of the two.
Right.
And there's a couple of rockers on there that I still think are pretty good. 5 years, 6 years, however many years after releasing that CD. Our EPK, those of you in the business know, our electronic press kit, the song that we would send to radio stations and anybody else we were trying to convince to either book us in their club or play us on their radio station, was a song called What's That Goo?
That's right.
Now, again, we didn't write, the lead singer wrote this. We did not write the song.
We're not responsible for the content of the song.
Because if you think about the worst possible meaning a song called What's That Goo could have, it's almost as bad as that.
Yeah.
Although it's clever because it's about the former president from the 1990s, Bill Clinton. And we'll leave it at that. But the point is, whatever you think of the song, you get to see us live in several different venues because it was our EPK, our electronic press kit, our way of showing people at clubs, here's what it looks like when you have us in your club. Or here's what it sounds like when you hear our music on your radio station. EPK, Ron Toole and the Capitalists, What's That Goo? There's part of the answer to that question. Well, what does it sound like when you guys do music? We know you're musicians.
I think Jeff on YouTube says, found it.
I think our heaviest rocker, our most straightforward rocker was a song called Chainsaw.
Yeah, Chainsaw is great.
Ron
It's a
Toole
great
and the
song,
Capitalists,
actually.
Chainsaw. Mm-hmm. And I have posted a link to the last song we released, which was fun. We released it on 7-inch vinyl, on a record. And the song was called He Who Must Die. The lyrics are
1 plus 9 plus 8 plus 4. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, he who must die.
The lyrics are actually kind of violent, kind of terrible.
It's quite violent. It's like, it's kind of dystopian. I'll just say that.
I'll put it this way.
It's also horrible.
We never got contacted by the Secret Service.
Yeah, we didn't.
For threatening the life of the president. So apparently either we were that obscure, which is probably the true answer, or they just didn't take it that serious, which is good. They shouldn't have took it that seriously.
It's just creative license.
We did not have in mind to assassinate the president. And I have to say, just like with the CD, with the first album, Amy and I did not write those lyrics, okay?
That's right. We are not responsible for the content.
I won't be held responsible. That's right.
Prosecutors will be violated.
Prosecutors will be violated. Yes, they will. And the only reason I mentioned that song, that final song, is because if you asked me, well, yeah, Robert, but do you have any songs where you played any good? That was my best guitar solo, was on He Who Must Die.
It's pretty good,
I really think.
Now, Jim here on Facebook here, he says, the only piano performance I've seen on your page from anyone is that of that dead guy you two have imprisoned in your closet.
Oh, goodness. Well, I will do a Facebook post after the show with links to me playing. I do a lot of Beatles-related stuff. Not so much by intention, but I like the Beatles, and they're easy to play simple versions of and still have it sound kind of okay. But yeah, it's pretty recent. There's a version of me playing Elton John's Mona Lisas and Mad Hatters from the Honky Chateau album, and there's a few things out there. I'll point links to them, and then you can listen to them and say, oh, that's why Robert never posts links to his music. But since you were kind enough or naive enough to ask, that is the answer to that.
Yes.
Now back to the question at hand, because we could talk about music all night, and maybe we will. But what does it mean to have a positive attitude? And I went looking for resources on this. There's some great stuff by Martin Seligman, the man behind positive psychology. And you should look up the Wikipedia article on him, which incidentally is in the show notes, and that will give you some really good ideas about positive psychology. But what I mean when I talk about positive attitude is optimism is realism. And what that means is, and it's funny because Martin Seligman, it turns out he talks about realistic optimism versus, I forget the word for unrealistic optimism. Yes, when you believe good things will happen for no reason and, they're not really likely to happen. But no, optimism is realism, and the reason for that is, well, I'll go right to the root, right to the metaphysics, right to the underlying reasons why optimism is realism, and the answer is because values are primary. Because you are here to live a life and not just to not die. So when bad things happen to you, you fix them. And then you walk away from that stuff. But when good things happen, you keep that coming, and you celebrate it, and you enjoy it. You don't ignore it. You don't leave it behind. And it turns out that for most people, and this is necessarily biologically true, the vast majority of what happens to you all day, every day, is good stuff. Well, what do you mean it's good stuff? Nothing good happened to me today. I sat on the couch, I watched television, or I just had breakfast and lunch and dinner, or I didn't really do anything. But what did you do in those moments? Even the couch potato that I sang about recently on Lee Wardlaw's thread, the people who aren't making very much of their lives, if you're keeping yourself out of the hospital, if you're keeping yourself from going insane.
Yeah, if you're above ground.
If you're above ground. I love that expression. I think that was Sonny Elliott, the newsman on Detroit Powerhouse, WJR. This is not just Detroit, it's covered 3 different states. 50,000 watt powerhouse. And Sonny Elliott always used to say, any day above ground is a good day. And that's not just a cute figure of speech or an aphorism, as our friend John asked for recently on his thread on Facebook. I'll be talking about those aphorisms. But really, any day above ground means you ate something, you drank something, you did something to get through that day. We take everything for granted. And we have to. You have to take things for granted or you can't survive.
Right, you have to automatize things and just, keep doing it so you're efficient and effective.
The old expression, stop and smell the roses, is there for a reason. And it's not because, we never remember to smell the roses. It's because you can't spend all day smelling roses. But that makes it too easy to forget. What did the philosopher Ferris Bueller say? Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop once in a while and take a look around, you could miss it. And that's absolutely true. Last line in the film, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and great philosophy. So
now John is in the comments here on Facebook. He asks Pollyannism.
Pollyannism. It's funny because we did talk about that. We've been accused. I've been accused. Amy doesn't get accused of this. People know better with her. I've been accused of Pollyannism, of looking on the bright side when there isn't a bright side. Or as in that film, Pollyanna. Which I think was based on a book. I've never read the book. I've only seen the film, and I only saw it a year or two ago. You're like, if I'm such a Pollyanna, I really ought to see this movie. But it turns out that if you watch the movie, yes, this girl has an almost annoying habit of taking any negative situation and finding what is good about it or what could be good about it. And toward the end of the film, she actually loses her optimism. Briefly. But tragically. And then it turns around at the very end, but in a very reasonable, realistic way. The film is not unrealistic in that regard. But even in the case of a Pollyanna who refuses to acknowledge the negatives, which is not what happens in that film, that would be a bad thing. But I'll tell you what, one of the things that happens when you ground your optimism, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the fact that lifespans have been increasing invariably and regularly, especially for all of modern history since the Industrial Revolution, when you look at the fact that crime rates were on a constant descent until the 1960s, and then there were spikes in the 70s and even in the 80s, but since 1990, crime rates have continued to decline, with a brief uptick during a couple parts of COVID. If you look at mortality rates and child mortality rates around the world, if you look at poverty rates, if you look at the amount of capital adjusted for inflation that people live on around the world, if you look at standards of living, if you look at just about every conceivable, and the great thing is you can look at these measures. You can pick up a copy of Matt Ridley's book, or Steven Pinker's, the obvious one, The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined Through the Centuries. You can look at the numbers. He gives you the numbers. It's great. And it's funny because there are people online who debate the numbers back and forth. Oh, well, Pinker was looking at this, but not as this. And they're not seeing the big picture of everything is getting better all the time. It saves you from being the so-called Pollyanna who only looks at the bright side of things. Because I'm looking at history. You know, I talked before about how kids these days, it's tragic. Too many kids these days, and even some older people my age, as old as I am, think that things have never been worse. When by almost every measure, and they always find those few exceptions, by almost every measure, things have never been better. And not a little better than the 80s, a little better than the 60s, a little better than the turn of the century. Massively better. Incredibly better. People say, oh yeah, I wish I could go back and live in the 1890s. Yeah, sure you wish you could live in the 1890s, but, you know, with 2020 level of sanitation and hot and cold running water instead of privies and chamber pots, and with 2020 kinds of medicine and not the kinds of diseases that we had in the 1890s, and with 2020 levels of industrial production and not people being drowned in molasses because of a boiler explosion, and the kinds of industrial disasters that you just don't see anymore. In medicine, in education, but especially, oh my God, especially in women's rights and racial equality and what some people would consider fringe, like gay rights. You don't want to live in the 1890s. I wouldn't want to live as a white man in that kind of culture and see my wife or my children go through the things that people went through at that time. The kind of persecution that you were subject to if you were the wrong race, the wrong religion, for Pete's sake. God forbid you were an atheist. So yes, in answer to the question, Pollyannism, absolutely not. Unless by Pollyannism you mean optimism, grounded optimism, the kind of optimism that looks at every situation like the girl in the film did and said not what's wrong, but what can I do?
Well, okay, so before we get back to Jim's question, which is a great question, first I just want to say, thank Robert Nasir, for creating this show. And as the creator of this show, we do need and appreciate your support to continue on with our podcasts, not just this one, but also the one on the Ayn Rand Center UK, Life on Earth, and essays with James Valliant now. And so now more than ever, we would love to have your support. Just please go to robertnasir.com and you can be one of our patrons and or send us a one-time gift on PayPal.
Oh,
so
yes.
there is your opportunity to send us love if you are feeling it.
And thank you to those of you who already do. I talked to Diana, the aforementioned Pokémon fan, last night. We went out to dinner and she said, you know, on your Patreon, are you doing tiers? And so, oh no, we've thought about that. Tiers of support. The $2
There's so
contributors
much
and
to
the $10 contributors and the $50 contributors, and you give different people different levels of silver and gold and perks, and like, yeah, we got to figure that out. So thank you to all of you who are already patrons of the show. Greatly appreciate it, and we will be doing shout-outs. In fact, let me do that officially. I'm going to announce today on February 27th, because it turns out I don't have contact information for everybody who is a patron. We're going to start announcing names of the patrons. And if you're already a patron of the show, if you're on Patreon and you're supporting the show, let me know, please, if you don't want your name shouted out. I don't think there's going to be anybody who will say no, but I know there's legitimate privacy concerns or just public shyness, whatever the reason might be. Let me know if you don't want your name shouted out, because let's make it official, starting in 2 weeks, not next week, but the week after. Yeah, we've got to start shouting out our patrons, and because we deeply appreciate it. So we need to do that as part of the show wrap and let you know just how much we appreciate it, and let everybody else know, hey, these are the cool kids. So
yeah, so back to Jim's wonderful question. Thank you. So basically, what does it mean to have a positive attitude? Does it mean you deny the negatives? Does it mean that, you accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative? Is there more to it than that? And yes, as a matter of fact, I wrote up something that I would like to share with you. My secret sauce for being positive. Secret sauce. Oh. Secret KFC ingredients. All right, so do you want to go first or should I?
No, I want you to go.
All right, so basically, I oftentimes, I mulled your questions over, Jim, and, just because I'm just amazing.
It sounds like you put them in the stock pot and let them stew for a couple hours here.
Yeah, well, I introspected on it. You know what? I thought about it. I sat down with it for a bit, and, I immediately went to basically a high pressure situation, which I put myself into a lot. Not just on these wonderful podcasts and public speaking and all of that, and hosting conferences and Great Lakes Objectivists and all of this other stuff that I do. Because I'm a natural introvert, I'm naturally shy, so I pushed myself.
Well, we've done a lot of that together, but you've got one skill I don't have.
Yeah, and that is I dance. So I've danced all my life. I've been in performances. Recently, I've been in flamenco performances, the Spanish Andalusian dance. And it's a very hard dance. I'll just say that. It's very difficult.
For some of us, it's impossible.
So I immediately went to that high stress that scenario for myself, and I thought, what do I do to keep myself positive when I'm, number one, practicing and going up on stage and not freaking out and not falling over and not killing myself and not embarrassing myself. Thankfully I've never actually
killed yourself,
fallen over on stage, thankfully, or tripped or anything. And so the thing is that I noticed something about myself. I know myself. I know when I worry. I know when I feel insecure. I know when I feel like I'm really, really overwhelmed with stress and worry. And so I know the patterns that I go through emotionally and conceptually, and in terms of what I do to plan my day, how I plan out the practice, how many times I practice flamenco before I actually perform, what I need to do to prepare, get everything together. And there's a lot of worry involved. So I've learned, I did a little introspection. I worry when I start practicing. That's number one. Then I worry most when I start running out of time to practice. So right before I practice, like before I start practicing, I worry. Like right now, I've got a performance on March 11th at this one library, and so I'm worrying right now. I'm a little on edge about it, but I know it's going to be okay because I've seen this pattern before. I know exactly what's going to happen. I know myself. I know my emotional ups and downs. And so it's predictable. So I can go in and use the tools that I need, such as positive self-talk, making sure that I get enough sleep, make sure that I exercise, make sure that I have a positive attitude in terms of, cracking jokes about it or just trying to get more enthusiastic about it. And so I thought about this, and because I really do worry. I worry like nobody's business. It's crazy how much I worry. And honestly, I came up with 3 questions for myself about worry. I said, would my performance be negatively affected if I told myself the worry hadn't actually motivated me? So if I realized that the worry didn't actually do anything for me, would my performance be affected in any way, negatively or positively? Next question, did the worry help my performance? Did all that worry and stress and negative self-talk and frustration, did it actually help my performance? And really, I think the biggest question is, would I have practiced or performed any differently if I hadn't worried?
Well, those are great questions. And the answers aren't as obvious as you might think.
Yeah, but I really think that, I go through these periods of negative self-talk when I'm trying to get something done and I'm in a time crunch and I'm stressed out about it. Honestly, that stress and that worry doesn't help my performance at all. If I can remember that while I'm worrying, I can then kind of go in, monitor myself, and give myself some good ideas to say to myself. That the worry doesn't make a difference to my performance. Therefore, I don't need to do it because I know what I'm doing already. I have a plan. I'm carrying out. I'm executing it. And when the worry stops for me? Right before I go on stage.
Right before you go on stage.
The worry, it completely lifts. It dissipates entirely because I know that I have everything that I need to do the job that I came there to do, and all I need to do is focus and concentrate and then go with the flow of the music and have fun. That's it. That's all I need to do.
Well, I guess that explains why when you were a little girl and you were part of a dance troupe, the Pussycat Polka,
yes.
When you went up to dance, all of the other girls ran away and you were the only one brave enough to actually dance.
It's true. The 4 of us, all of them were chatty Cathys. I barely spoke a word to anybody and everybody thought something was wrong with me. The girls thought it was quite extreme to know that there were 1,000 people in the audience. That was the rumor at the time, and they refused to go on stage. And I said, no, I planned this. I worked for this. I'm going on stage doing it myself.
Well, Jim rightly says you are amazing.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, I'm amazed and on a regular basis.
But I have more to say.
Yes.
We talk about, in our previous episodes, we've talked about the autumn and winter blues, seasonal affective disorder and things like that,
Yep.
It's all about knowing yourself. It's all about, when do you need to monitor yourself more regularly? So I need to monitor myself more regularly in January and February. And it's actually been pretty good the last couple of months, I think. And so you have to know when you need that extra self-care, and you plan and you strategize from there. And I've got, concrete things to do to say about me being more positive. But
well, what's on your list? What are your strategies?
Gosh, well, here are some of the ones that I personally like. Crack more jokes. My father, who before he passed away and everything, he was a king of cracking jokes under stress, and I always admired him in doing that. And I always wanted to cultivate that. And so, yeah, I'm trying to cultivate that a little bit more. Take real breaks. So if I'm working at home, 8 hours at my house, I really need to plan for taking a break. And I have a timer set for noon every day to tell me, take a real break. Don't just eat while working.
Yeah, when you're at the office, it's a little easier to know when it's lunchtime.
Have something to look forward to after work. And that I need to plan better. I need to work on that. Yeah, because I need to, and there's, practice meditation, focus on the long term instead of the short term, listen to music that matches your mood, like upload positivity to your brain.
Ooh,
so
I see that, and I'm wondering what that one means. Upload positivity to your brain.
It just basically means
through music selection?
Through music selection, or watch something funny, watch some cat videos to get your, or cat videos. or peruse your favorite parts of Atlas Shrugged, the ones that are most meaningful and happy for you to think of. Just put more positive content in, more inspirational content into your mind. And, there's aphorisms you can say, for positive self-talk. And those, you need to kind of work out on your own. And what's right for you. You have to think about that. But yeah, that's about it. But I mean, other than that, exercise most days of the week. Exercise is essential, I think, for a healthy, positive mood. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And get enough sleep. Regular sleep. Which can be hard.
In an article on Psych Central, Realism and Optimism, do you need both? Oh, wait, optimism is realism, but I had to take a look anyway. And they write, optimism usually is viewed as a desirable attribute, but many believe it is only really helpful if it is realistic. Oh, well, I'm on board with that. That's kind of addressing John's earlier question. Should we be Pollyannas? No. Dr. Martin Seligman, former president of the American Psychological Association and legendary researcher in the field of optimism, discovered that optimism or pessimism lies in the way you explain the events that happen to you. Such automatic thoughts often cause us to assess events inaccurately and jump to erroneous conclusions. Unrealistic optimism is defined as believing that you are more likely to experience pleasant events than is actually the case, and less likely than others to experience negative ones. It can keep you from being able to change direction when you're unable to see the trouble that lies ahead. Pessimists tend to believe that bad situations are their fault, will always happen to them, and will affect everything in their life. Now, I got that far and thought, pessimists believe bad situations are their fault. There's an interesting idea in the extreme ownership movement, and we've talked about it before, where people take ownership of the bad things that happen to them, but they don't find fault, not in the moral sense. And that's a challenge. But I think awareness is curative in this case, just knowing that you can take ownership of even the bad things that happen to you without taking that sense of moral blame or that blow to your self-esteem. And say not, what did I do to make this bad thing happen? But again, what can I do about it? Including whatever role I played in it, what can I learn and not do that mistake again? So I thought that was interesting. The article ascribes that pessimists, this ownership idea, they do say, and this is kind of true and kind of not, optimism and pessimism operate on a continuum. Well, fair enough. Of which the midpoint is realism. No. They were so good right up until that point. Realism is not the midpoint between optimism and pessimism. I mean, maybe you could think of it as a midpoint between an unrealistic pessimism and an unrealistic optimism. But they say realists explain events just as they are. Now, this is interesting because he does say, continue to write, realistic optimists are cautiously hopeful of favorable outcomes, but they do as much as they can to obtain the desired results. And that's really the point. That's what I take away from this. People measured as realistic optimists also tend to have other desirable traits, such as extroversion and cheerfulness. I don't think cheerfulness is a trait. I think cheerfulness is a result of more than just being an optimist. It's a result of regularly achieving your values. So, they go on to say different cultures vary in their level of realism, for example, and they go on and on. That with that, link to that article, which I do think is worth reading, is in the show notes. I especially read it for the reference to Martin Seligman. There's more information about him in the show notes as well. You mentioned aphorisms, which I think can relate to this.
Yeah, one of my favorite aphorisms on this,
yes,
that I found in my research today was, "Good things come to those who work hard."
Yes.
Because that is the the metaphysical realism that you have there. If you practice enough, you work hard enough, then good things will come to you. Of course.
Yeah, I used to like the expression "luck is for the ill-prepared."
Yeah, yeah.
But John, who is in the chat, actually posted a thread on aphorisms, asked people for their favorite aphorisms. We've done that before too, and that's always fun. And somebody posted, maybe it was John, I should look it up real quick now, posted a quote by Louis Pasteur, and the inventor of many things, including the pasteurization process. And what did he say? Something more positive than, he didn't refer to the ill-prepared. Now I've got to look it up here. I should never, ever, ever look up additional things during the show.
I can help you.
John Paquette's thread on aphorisms and the quote by Louis Pasteur.
Okay. Let me see if I can find
it. In any
it.
event,
keep going.
Of course, since we've done a whole episode on aphorisms, I couldn't resist naming a few of mine, including some recent ones that I didn't even have during the show. Even though they're so obvious, I should have thought of these long ago. For example, if you want to live well, you have to live well. Which sounds tautological, but it's not, because of course, live has two different meanings there. If you want to live well, you have to live well.
All right, so what are we looking for in John Paquette's aphorisms?
Pasteur, Louis Pasteur.
Let me see.
Yes. That's related to the other one that I posted, which is if you want what you've never had, this was one of our Post-it notes before, if you want what you've never had, you're going to have to do what you've never done. Which I find motivating in regard to making changes. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So I left a few out. I didn't post all of these on John's thread and promised that I would mention some of them on the show later. So real quick. You are enough. There's an old one that's kind of meaningless, right?
Not necessarily.
The question
it depends on the context.
The question is, well, what people usually mean by it is, are they good enough and are they doing enough? But my version of that is you are enough because you get to decide what is enough. I am larger than anything I am going through. Can help you when you're feeling the kind of pressure that you were talking about.
Mine, actually, one of my aphorisms,
yes.
And write this down, everybody, because this is part of the secret sauce.
Write it down.
Is it's a drop in the ocean. So if I make a mistake, and
yes.
I think of my life and my experience and my totality of knowledge.
Yes.
And I think of it as a giant ocean.
Yes.
Giant. I mean, you can't even see past, you don't see land anywhere in sight. And it's a raindrop.
That's right.
It's what happened was a raindrop going into that ocean, becoming part of that ocean, and you're learning from it. But it's not going to, you're not going to die.
Yep.
It's going to be okay.
Yep. That's why I always come back to the fact that you are here to live and not just to not die. Values. Values matter. Disvalues? Not so much. What's our rule for that? 97.3. You should be spending 97%, not just of your time, but of your resources, your time and your attention on values. And 3% of your time you've got to spend on disvalues, protecting yourself against them, making sure they don't happen again, buying insurance, supporting the kind of organizations that fight for the things that you believe in. It's not that you never focus on the negative, you just give it the amount of priority it deserves. You don't create a house, you don't build a house by refraining from knocking one down. A tree doesn't grow because you didn't cut one down. Food doesn't appear on your table because you didn't take it away. Values are positives. You live for the sake of positives, not for negations, not for negatives. You can't live on negatives, and you shouldn't live on negatives. So when bad things happen, you do address them, you focus on them long enough to learn whatever lessons they have to teach you, and you let that stuff go. But when good things happen, you live that. You wring the value, the experience out of it. Values matter. Disvalues not so much.
So were you looking for Louis Pasteur, Fortune Favors the Prepared Mind?
Thank you. Fortune favors the prepared mind. Of course, I love the connection to reason, because reason is man's means of survival. The mind is primary over the body, even though they're integrated. The one drives the other. But also, it's positive. Fortune favors the prepared mind. It's all positive, as opposed to the expression that I'm more used to, which is, luck is for the ill-prepared. If you're not well prepared, you're going to need the luck, It's clever, it's cheeky, it's a little more humorous, but Louis Pasteur is more positive, so I like that. I like that very much. So,
yeah,
my answer to the initial subject, that topic of conversation that Jim was good enough to ask, is that, yes, absolutely, positive attitude to me. Again, even more than in positive psychology. Read the book by Martin Seligman. Incidentally, it's great. He started by studying learned helplessness. Let me read this real quick. Learned helplessness. Seligman's, I can't even read his name. Seligman's foundational experiments and theory of learned helplessness began at the University of Pennsylvania in 1967 as an extension of his interest in depression. Quite by accident, Seligman and colleagues discovered that the experimental conditioning protocol they used with dogs led to behaviors which were unexpected, in that, under the experimental conditions, the recently conditioned dogs did not respond to opportunities to learn, to escape from an unpleasant situation. And Seligman developed the theory further, finding learned helplessness to be a psychological condition in which a human being, or an animal, has learned to act or behave helplessly in a particular situation, usually after experiencing some inability to avoid an adverse situation, even when it actually has the power to change its unpleasant or even harmful circumstance. I remember listening to Anthony Robbins way back when I listened to that stuff. And he pointed out something that really stuck with me. He said, most of us have tried and failed at something and have decided to never try again. Most, or at least too many adults, have a long list of things they have tried and will never, ever try again. And he compares that to teaching your child how to walk. How long do you give the average 2-year-old, 3-year-old to learn how to walk before you give up and say, yeah, he's just not getting it, he's not going to walk? And the answer is, you don't give up. You never give up. Of course, my child's going to walk no matter what it takes to get him to the point where he can walk. And there's your secret for success. So this idea of learned helplessness that Martin Seligman discovered or defined, really rang true for me, that we learn helplessness. We learn, in this situation I'm helpless, and then we extend that out all too often. And it's something that I try, at least, to never do.
There's one more positivity cue here. I think we all should be aware of, and that is, permit yourself to be loved.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes.
Be ready to be loved,
yes,
as the song goes.
Yeah, so, if you have learned helplessness and you thought to yourself, I'm never going to ever ask so-and-so for this, or walk into somebody's office, or even permit myself to talk to anybody about this, and, remember that you are loved. You are liked, at least to the extent that somebody knows you and you're a good person. And count on that. You can count on that. And I've actually been doing that lately with regard to my own career. And I've been asking for help. I've been saying, this is what I can do. This is what I would like to do. And things are actually turning in a direction right now that's actually really nice. So maybe I'll talk about that later in another episode.
In the vast majority of the cases when we find ourselves lonely, and believe me, I've been there. I spent years that way. It's not that we can't find somebody who would love to be with us. It's not that we can't find somebody, we could make their entire life a beautiful thing. It's that we can't find that person that we want to be with, at least in that moment or at that time. Now, why do I mention that? What's the point of saying, well, I could find somebody to be with, but I can't find the kind of person I want to be with? Because reminding yourself of that fact is a reminder that you are lovable. To somebody out there, you're enormously lovable. You would be a miracle in their life. And it's much better to remind yourself, well, I don't feel lovable to the kind of person that I'm looking for and I really want in my life, versus I'm just not a lovable person, which is always a lie. That's not true. So I'm glad that you mentioned that and raised that point. I'm just looking at the chat here to make sure I didn't miss anything important. For example, Maria said, his sister made strawberry pancakes yesterday, but only with Hershey's syrup. Hershey's strawberry syrup, I forgot that was a thing, but it actually is. And I'm not one to judge. If it tastes good, it is good. And Jeff also mentioned, just finished the documentary of Triumph, my second favorite Canadian band. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I like that comment, and I'm going to take a moment to mention it, is because I'm a fickle Triumph fan. I was only a fan during their heyday on American radio, the Allied Forces album, and what was the one before that? Mm-hmm. And but there are a couple songs by Triumph, which some people think are kind of schmaltzy, but I think are amazing, that choke me up. We did a whole episode on things that bring tears to your eyes. And there's a couple of Triumph songs that fit that category, so I'll have to look for that documentary. I know it was kind of a shame when the band broke up, Rick Emmett left and found God or something like that. But I'll have to watch the documentary, find out more about it. Because Jeff, and you say your second favorite Canadian band. Obviously, we know who your favorite Canadian band is. We know who everybody's favorite Canadian band is. And if somebody comes along and says The Guess Who or Neil Young, I'm just going to slap them upside the head.
You've got No Means No. You've got DOA. You've got Shadowy Men on a Shadowy Planet.
Yeah. Sure. But he said favorite.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah. We'll talk about that after the show. We'll see if I can get your head right on that. But thank you for the comment, Jeff. I appreciate that. It says tragically hip.
Now,
look, I'm not going to rush to say who the best Canadian band is, but you can figure that out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think we can go a little while longer here. I know that we try to keep it at an hour, but I think that
or 5 minutes.
Yeah, or 5 minutes. But I think when we have a good question like this, Marius in the tubes here. He says, okay. Oh, yes. When you were talking about optimism and pessimism.
Yes.
So he says, is the midpoint not caring? Is realism not caring, or the midpoint of optimism and pessimism just flat affect?
We're going to do a whole show on Stoicism. What's good about it and what's not good about it. And that's already been better done by Aaron Smith at the Ayn Rand Institute.
Right.
But he's not as warm and fuzzy as we are. No. So we need to do our version of what's great about Marcus Aurelius and what
Marcus
needs to be left behind.
I love Marcus Aurelius. But you have to put his statements in a particular philosophical and psychological context that would actually work for you. Otherwise, if you take it the wrong way, it's really dreary. You
need to take him with crystals of sodium chloride, because there's good stuff in there unless you take it as a whole philosophy. Yeah.
Yes, and goodness, Jeff also says, with regard to the drop in the ocean, the mistake.
Yes.
He says, paying too much attention to the ripples of that drop lets you make it worse.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, you do it. Don't pay attention to the ripples.
Good.
I've made many mistakes, and I always just kind of laugh it off, and then and like if I'm in a work situation, I just tell tell the people that I work with, well, I'm going to do this to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I've got some fail safes here, and I've got some plans there, and I got this, that, and the other thing. It's no problem. You just work with what you have, and
yes.
Yeah.
So you keep looking at the chat. Let me know if I missed anything important. There's some great comments in there that I haven't read through, but real quick, homework for the week. I always have homework every week, and I tell you what my homework is, and you can join me if you like. My homework for the week, though, is to write out my aphorisms. And you say, well, Robert, didn't you do a whole show on aphorisms, and you wrote them out before, and now John has posted a thread on aphorisms, and you put a bunch there? And what happened was, when John posted that great thread where he's asking everybody, what are your aphorisms? I realized I could just cut and paste from when we talked about aphorisms, and I couldn't find them. Somehow I wrote out all those aphorisms. I wrote out my 15 favorite ones. But as I always do, like this, on permanent marker on legal pad, which is how this show is written.
Yes.
I never typed them up.
Uh-oh.
I didn't have, at least I couldn't find them in electronic format. I couldn't find them on Facebook. So my homework for the week, type out, I said write out, because I always say do everything with pen and paper, but in this case, type out my aphorisms. Mm-hmm. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to post them online. I'll post a few every day just for fun on the social networks, because all of them are brilliant, if he did say so himself, and he did. But you'll know that I actually did the homework because you'll see them online. My Post-it note for the week. I have two of them. One I already mentioned. Too many of us, by the time we're adults, have a long list of things we will never try again. That's written on one of these big 3x3 Post-it notes. I didn't hold that up for very long because my real Post-it note for the week says, and you can figure out how this ties in with today's theme of Optimism Is Realism. My real Post-it note for the week says, most of the things we worry about are never, ever going to happen.
It's true.
The vast majority, 99.999% of the things we worry about are never, well, it depends on how much of a worrier you are. Mm-hmm. I should stop interrupting myself. One more time. Most of the things we worry about are never, ever going to happen.
But one thing that actually did happen for Jeff in the YouTube chat, he said, I had the lead in my school musical when he was 11 years old with the opening song, and I had completely forgot everything, and they had to stop and talk to me backstage.
Yes.
And then after that, he went out and he nailed it.
Nailed it. All right. I did the same thing in elementary school. I played Huck Finn in a presentation of Tom Sawyer. So in the elementary school version of that, there were only a certain number of scenes, but it did include the scene in which I bring out the dead cat in a shoebox in order to perform the magic that's gonna give the result. And I walk out on stage and I don't have the shoebox. I forgot my prop. Now
because it was Schrodinger's cat.
It was Schrodinger's cat. Yeah, I would have opened the box. I don't think we really had a dead cat in elementary school anyway.
It was the Schrodinger's cat and box.
We not only didn't know whether the cat was dead or alive, we had no way to find out. I lost my prop. So when you're a kid, when you're a grade school kid, and you've got, you got the part of Huck Finn, that's like the third, number 3 part after Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher. And I forgot my prop. And the funny thing is, reading Marius talking in the chat.
Jeff
talking in the chat is, you remember that. Now, how many other things did I do back in grade school that, were not embarrassing and there were no issues? Everything went fine and I don't remember them at all.
And, that's another thing about, I forgot to put that in my notes. Thank you for reminding me about that. But that's one of the things about knowing yourself. Some people have a greater tendency to hang on to the negative. And, I don't know if it's some sort of like, I think it's some kind of predisposition that you have, like shyness or things like that.
Well, you have to.
and so you have to kind of like on a survival level, you have to remember what the danger is.
There's a reason why most of the news you read is bad news.
Yeah.
And it's because when good things happen, there's nothing you have to do about it.
So you can compensate. You can say, you know what? I know myself. I know that I have a tendency to worry too much.
Yes.
And I have a tendency to hold on to negative memories.
Yep.
And you know what? I can compensate. I can dial it back. I can then, strategize and figure out what I need to do in my positive self-talk, or all the different techniques that you can do to be more positive. And, I can handle all of it. I can actually work with it, work around it.
Yep. And Linda in the Facebook chat brings it right back where we started and says exactly the right thing. Jim had asked, does Johnny Mercer's advice to accentuate the positive eliminate the negative? Say everything, or is the statement incomplete? And it's a pop song. A pop song is going to give you that quick aphorism, that quick, cute, but wise version of it. No, it doesn't say everything, but it says something important. So Linda says in the chat, accentuate the positive. When we say accentuate the positive, we don't mean blindly focus more on that because that's more fun to think about. No, focus on it because the negatives are going to seem like they really matter. And in some ways they do. You've got to do what you've got to do about them. But then you let it go, because what matters is not solving problems, but living once the problems are solved.
Yeah, and we have a question here from Marius on the tubes. When I say the tubes, I don't mean the band. I mean YouTube.
YouTubes.
The YouTubes. So he says, okay, what about something you can make happen that you don't want to happen, but maybe needs to happen to abide justice, but also maybe should wreck your life if it or could wreck your life if it happens? Do you worry then? So, okay,
yes.
let me get the context here.
What do you do if you're between a rock and a hard place?
Yes. Yeah, what do you do? Yeah, but I mean, I suppose I'd have to get a little bit of a better concretization of that example. But one of the other aphorisms that I have, and I've had this happen, like if a loved one dies and the people around you are going insane because that's how they deal with tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And some people deal with tragedy by pissing everybody off around them, and they
acting
go insane.
Yes.
And so I say, actually, Robert, I picked this up from Robert. You, Robert, awesome.
What did I do?
When things are at their worst, you need to be at your best.
Yes, when things are at their worst that you need to be at your best.
Yes.
I'll go back to real quick here my list of aphorisms, which again I've been typing out here. One of the most controversial things I ever posted on Facebook. I said this: treat others not as they deserve to be treated, but as you deserve to treat them.
Yep.
Treat others not as they deserve to be treated, but as you deserve to treat them.
Well, now you could say treat other people as they deserve to be treated, and as what was the last one?
As you deserve to treat them.
As you deserve to treat them. So in other words,
well, but that would confuse the distinction.
Right, that's true.
And,
you're right.
And let me explain why.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are not the world's policeman.
Right.
If you feel that it is justice for you to do justice to everybody who ever slights you,
mm-hmm.
well, first of all, you would have to go at war with the U.S. government.
Mm.
There are countless injustices against you about which you can and should do nothing. You are not the world's policeman. Sometimes the best place to put those who don't serve your values and ends, even those who assault your values and ends, sometimes the best place to put them is in your rear view mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And watch them, or don't even watch them, fade away into the distance. There are people who have wronged me, and I've had to do something about it. But most of the people who've ever wronged me, the right thing to do about it is not to give them what they deserve, but to treat them the way I deserve to treat them. And that often just means getting them the hell out of my life.
Right. And you know what that does is that if you have a tendency, or if you were raised, say, if you were raised Catholic, for instance, and you have a tendency to act on duty ethics, or you feel that it's your duty then to enact justice, to reveal to the world that so and so is a wrongdoer, and you really fixate. I've done this. I've fixated on this before in my life with certain people who were not kind to me, and honestly, I was the loser. I really fixated on it way too much, and I did a disservice to myself.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to enact justice. You've got to exact justice. You've got to punish people for what they've done. But it depends on where they fall in the context of your life and within your hierarchy of values. Sometimes that feeling that I need to seek retribution is a self-sacrifice. It is self-destructive.
Yes.
And the best thing you can possibly do is let them go. In fact, I've said before, the biggest punishment that I can give anybody with whom I've had a falling out, the biggest punishment, the worst thing that I can do to them is leave. Because now they don't get me in their life anymore.
Right.
And what greater loss can I throw at somebody than you don't get me anymore?
That's right. So I hope, Marius, that maybe that helps your situation. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, he did say, stop with the cliched thinking, Robert.
Oh.
Yes. Aphorisms can be cliches. You got to be careful with that stuff.
Yes. It takes certain context, and it takes a wonderful philosophical grounding. Thank you, Ayn Rand.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Yeah, we don't talk about Ayn Rand enough on Sundays. You know, Thursday is our philosophical show, and we're always talking about Ayn Rand, but she really is the best.
Oh, and so Maria says, you two must have always been great people. No.
You know, speaking of philosophy, speaking of Ayn Rand, it's funny you say that because
I appreciate that.
There are a lot of people who tell their philosophy story or their Ayn Rand story, and they say, well, you know, I discovered these ideas. It was really what I was already living or already thinking. It just helped me, you know, kind of sort them out or understand them a little better. No, I am not that guy. I was always probably kind of a nice guy, but I was not honest, or at least not as explicitly honest or consistently honest.
Not honest. I remember when I was not honest. One of my teenagers, I would lie.
Yeah, I was. Well, just as an example, I was not. No, I won't even say some of the things that I used to do. Suffice to say that philosophy has made a big difference in my life, and improving my philosophy has meant a lot. So thank you very much. When you say you two must have always been great people.
Yeah, and then he goes on to say, this was not impersonal. I am caught between integrating a moral absolute and my own relativistic past.
Yes, well,
aren't we all sometimes?
Yes. My advice in that regard is expand your hierarchy of values. So if you're being put in a situation where you feel you can't act on principle, first of all, figure out whether you're being held to that standard by somebody else, and it's not going to be your fault if you can't act on principle without it being a self-sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you pay your taxes, and you're like, I shouldn't pay my taxes. That's acquiescence to force. No, it would be a self-sacrifice for you not to pay your taxes and end up in jail. Well, but that violates the principle of justice. I'm taking an easy example because I know the personal ones with friends and family and people who will hold your virtues against you. Those are much harder, much more complicated.
Yes.
You can't make the situation a simple one. Well, sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't. And that's all I'm going to say in this context. But yes, I absolutely feel your pain. It ain't easy. Do the best you can.
And focus on your values.
And don't be too hard on yourself.
Yes. Be gentle with yourself. Be kind to yourself and focus on your values. There's more aphorisms that might be germane to this context.
Yes. So thank you very much, Jim Ashley. Again, if you're not already following or friends with Jim Ashley on Facebook,
he
regularly posts and sometimes reposts essays that he's written about various philosophical comments, and he grounds them. He'll often connect them to films, often old films, which is good because we love old movies. And again, if you're not already friends with or following Jim Ashley, and you don't have to be friends with him to see his stuff, because like me, he posts everything public. He's not one of those people who says, oh, I need to make everything friends only or else the bad guys will find me. I don't know. Maybe the bad guys will find us someday, but at least for now, follow or friend him. And I don't know. We are running so over. I can't believe everybody's still in the chat. You guys are just the best. You are awesome. And
Yes,
we must
you
be doing
are.
okay, too. So, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm just going to say that show notes will be posted right after the show wraps up. Links to all the stuff we talked about. The quirky holidays, the great Mardi Gras, which again is on March 1st this year. If you're in New Orleans or anywhere near it, links to the Leonard Peikoff, the Yara and Brooks shows that we mentioned, the Robert Tracinski article, our own Friday show, Great Fun with James Valliant. Links to all that stuff will be in there. Link to robertnasir.com. If you do want to support the show, God, I love that. Links to our Patreon and PayPal are at robertnasir.com. Links to all of our stuff. The 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group, where you, like Jim did, can give us suggestions or comments, or hey, why don't you talk about this thing? Let us know what you would like to hear, what you would like to chat about in the YouTube or Facebook chat on Sundays at 6 o'clock Eastern Time.
All of it.
All of it. And as always, thank you for joining us. We wish you every success. We want you to take all of this and say, oh, this is what this would look like in my life. We wish you success. We wish you flourishing. We wish you little bits of wisdom and the kind of positivity, which just means focus on values that makes life not always perfect, but in general magnificent. And as always, including the awesome possum here, as always, we wish you love.